All right, so today we have an amazing guest. She is a registered psychologist operating her own private practice, YYC Psychology, and it's evolved over the past 7 years. She's been counseling clients for over 14 years and feels honored and privileged to walk alongside people and their personal journeys to provide a safe and supportive environment to all her clients in the foundation of her practice. She explores vulnerabilities, themes, and patterns with her clients to offer insight into their behavior and emotional patterns and motivations. She believes in empowering and encouraging her clients to provide them with tools to take action and to show up in their own life, which I think is huge. Um, she specializes in addiction and mental health. And under that umbrella, she works with people around topics such as substance abuse, relationships, problematic behaviors, food, enabling, codependency, trauma, phobias, stress, anxiety, depression, and grieving. She also has a badass tool belt, which I'm so excited to talk about. She is an ART certified psychologist, which is accelerated resolution therapy. It involves eye movement, which maybe I'll have her speak on in a bit. But it works to reprogram the way distressing images and memories are stored in the brain so they no longer trigger strong physical and emotional reactions. She's also a clinically certified hypnotherapist, which is so cool. It's something I eventually want to get into. And she uses this to complement her practice. She provides workshops in person and online. She's a speaker. She's presented to corporations. And she's always known she's wanted to be a psychologist. And she's a mama. She's a mama of 2 girls, 3 and 8, and also an entrepreneur. So the tool belt is vast, and I would love to welcome Kaylie Rodriguez. Thank you so much for coming on. I would love for you to maybe start off with a little bit about, I think we don't talk about it as women very much, being a mama and an entrepreneur and juggling all the balls. I know you mentioned having a bit of work-life balance, but sometimes that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me first and foremost. I really appreciate the platform. And being a mom and an entrepreneur, it's hard, right? There's a lot of hats I think moms wear in general, let alone running my own business and, meeting client needs and stuff like that. So it is a learning curve. And I feel it always is a learning curve. So I don't feel like you arrive at the destination of figuring it all out, which is a common trap that, I think women in general, and we have high expectations of ourselves. So we figure we have to have it all figured out. And for me, my practice is constantly evolving and changing. I mean, we've thrown COVID in here. We've had homeschooling for a period of time. My kids are physically in school at this point. But, there's lots of different road bumps and things that are thrown into the pot, so to speak. So there's always this adjustment. And where I feel very grateful as an entrepreneur is that I'm able to shift things to meet the needs of my family. So I often will say I'm so thankful and grateful that I'm in a place where I can be a mom first. But I'm also, an entrepreneur and a career person. So I'm thankful that I can also maintain my career at the same time. So I find it's been like a little bit of a teeter-totter. So sometimes things get a little bit out of balance. And it was a learning curve for me through COVID where, the College of Alberta Psychologists and the Psych Association of Alberta had all of our practice moved to an online platform. So working from home, seeing clients virtually at the time, I found my work boundaries were quite loosey-goosey because I thought, I can fit someone in here, I can fit someone in there. And my work day no longer held structured hours or structured days for that matter. So that's what I mean in that sense, that it is a learning curve. And, similar to the theme that we're talking about today and looking at kind of our intuition and our feelings, I found myself feeling overwhelmed and feeling kind of stretched too thin. And it's a good reminder that, oh, okay, well, what's missing or what am I not doing for myself, and being able to adjust things accordingly. So I think for anybody, any mom, I just say be gentle with yourself. Listen to yourself, listen to your feelings, and that will guide you. And there are times you kind of feel like you hit the sweet spot and you've got that perfect life balance. And I say perfect almost facetiously, but we have that life balance and things are flowing. Enjoy it for what it is in that moment. And then, of course, things will go off kilter, and just remind yourself you can get back to where you were.
Right. Just like little course corrections, I find.
Exactly.
Is something that we need. And I think you hit the nail on the head, is where as women, we tend to feel like we need to strive for that perfection. And if we don't have, a set routine and everybody's perfectly falling into the routine, we're off the rails and reacting and having so much judgment. And COVID, I think, has been blessing and a challenge for most.
For sure.
In showing us, the stuff that we might need to work on or adjust or learn to be more flexible. I think. Right. Most of the women that I work with, just having to react pretty frequently, right? Course correct all the time, and not being comfortable with maybe having that flexibility at the start, right? Many of the women that I see, like, children are scheduled. There's work in there. There's not really much room for that flexibility. So I think it's been a steep learning curve for most, for all of us.
Yeah.
But good. And I think that leads me kind of into all the noise that's going on, like all the stuff in the news, social media, all people essentially projecting out their crap into the world, and we're bombarded by it all the time. Do you have any kind of anything you want to talk on that? And then maybe we could talk about some tools or things that you use or that are simple to implement.
Yeah, sure. Maybe I can share a little story to start about this. And when COVID and all this stuff first hit, and I do agree, it kind of it puts a magnifying glass on people's vulnerabilities, but also it has created opportunities and things as well. So it's not all negative. But when this thing first started and schools shut down and all of that, my oldest, who you mentioned is 8, so at the time she was in grade 2, and kind of every Friday she'd have a bit of a meltdown, and she'd have all these feelings, including myself for that matter. We'd have a good cry on Fridays, and she was really looking to kind of create the story to figure out why she was feeling the way she was. And after, I think it was about the 3rd week this happened, and she was like grasping for straws and saying, well, maybe it was because this happened last year, or maybe it was because that, like, it was getting pretty, far stretched there. And there's a far reach about her story there. And I realized in that moment is, including myself, is you get all these feelings that build up in your body throughout the week. I mean, everything you do and everything you're exposed to has an emotional imprint on you. And if we're not connected to our feelings, if we're not addressing our emotional health through, taking time and space and awareness, these things will bubble up. They come to the surface on a feelings-based level. And then people try and create the story as to, why do I feel this way? And I fell into the same trap. I was feeling anxious, and then I'm like, well, why do I feel this way? And then I find myself turning on the news, and I'm like, well, maybe it's this. And then it was, wait a minute, Kaylie, like, hold on here, and turned off the news. And I just, same thing, realized I have a bunch of feelings that have been storing up in my body I haven't been connected to. But then the challenge is we look to our environment to create the story. What I talk to clients about is, I term that, the term is decision-based evidence making. So it sounds backwards, because it is backwards. So I've got all this stuff that's going on. So literally, like, the lens, the glasses that I see my environment through are going to be distorted. So it will magnify things. So if I'm already feeling anxious, as an example, it will only fuel and focus on those certain things that will provoke and evoke more anxiety. And in turn, it just clouds and clouds and clouds, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's that magnification aspect. And that's just one example. So a big thing that I commonly will talk about in my sessions with people is the theme of boundaries, having boundaries on what you're exposing yourself to. And boundaries, they're ultimately defined as, what do you need in order to feel safe? And I use safe as a blanketed term that way. But again, it's like, how are these things serving you? So as far as the news goes, I stay up to date on some things, but I'm not looking at the news every day. I'm not exposing myself to it because it's too much. Things are constantly changing. Things are constantly, moving, and it becomes too much. Social media, same sort of thing. I mean, there's so much stuff that's circulating. So for me, I'm connected into my business social media because I love the messages that with the accounts that I follow and things like that. They're all healthy, mental health, holistic health, recovery based themes. So that I find is something that will fill me up. So boundaries is really key.
Awesome. I like that. That's one of the great things that do we have a glitch?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, there was some feedback on my side.
Oh, okay.
With the social media, especially with Instagram, Facebook is a bit different, but I love how you can essentially curate your feed, right?
Right.
I'm not saying like the cancel culture, like cancel everything that maybe evokes an emotional reaction or like brings stuff up for you, but it's nice to be able to curate what you would like to look at, especially if that's a place that you're going for maybe some inspiration, right? Instead of triggered at every freaking post that you're going through. Where I was basically very limited my time on Facebook just because I don't want to like unfriend all my friends, but I don't necessarily need to hear all of their stuff. So I've had to implement those boundaries too, for sure.
And that's a key point too with boundaries, is it doesn't have to be all or nothing. So you don't have to unfriend somebody. You can, I mean, it can get there if you need to, but you can put limits on what you're exposed to. So, as far as some of the privacy settings and whatnot, you can adjust those things. And I'm just using social media here as an example, but boundaries don't have to be black or white. There's a lot of in between. And the other thing I would highlight with boundaries is that they're fluid. So you can try something out. So maybe that means I'll only go on Facebook once, a day for 20 minutes as opposed to every 20 minutes. Like some people can be quite excessive in their social media exposure. So when you put some boundaries down for yourself in that regard, you can see, how is this working for me? If that's too much, if that's still too much exposure, then perhaps I look at minimizing it further, or maybe I deactivate my account for the time being. So there are things that you can do to firm your boundaries up. They don't have to go all the way to, unfollow or deactivate right away. They can, but there's some steps in between. And I think that that's a hang up and a struggle for some people with boundaries, is they don't know where to start, or they feel like it's just one or the other, and it's too scary to deactivate it completely or unfollow somebody. There are a lot of little steps in between that people can try and just see, how is this working for me?
Yeah, I love what you said, for it to be fluid, right? Like it's ever-changing seasons of our life. Maybe those boundaries that you set today aren't going to be necessary or 6 months down the road, right? I talk about that a lot with clients and food, like nutrition, where they're like, well, I need to pick a certain way of eating for the rest of my life, and this is the only way I'm going to eat. And I'm like, well, you're not going to be doing the same thing for the rest of your life, and your nutritional requirements won't be the same. So I like that you mentioned that, the boundaries, and they don't need to be a hard black and white, all or nothing too.
Yeah, and they're just for now, just for today. So, the simple question is, what do I need for myself today? You don't have to figure it out for forever because, like you said, things change. So really asking yourself, what do I need today? What's serving me today?
And I've also too been coming up, this same kind of theme has been coming up with a lot of my clients, and maybe you can have some tools with that, is with everything being so very uncertain. And there is so much, it seems like with the uncertainty, there's a lot of fear, like we talked about, mirroring all those kind of vulnerabilities and those things that we don't like. We've been shown that for a long time. Many of the ladies that I'm seeing, they are unsure of where to move, what the future looks like, and how to kind of start creating the future that they want, right? Like goals. If I ask any clients right now about like goal setting or what would you like to create in the future, everybody's like, dude, like I'm just trying to survive here. I can't even figure out what the future, like what I want to create, because I'm just like in this survival mode. Do you have any kind of tips on that stuff?
Yeah, I think as far as future-based reality, I mean, we're in a time of uncertainty with COVID, but we're also in a time of certain uncertainty pre-COVID. So nobody has the magic wand of what does my future look like, or what does it entail, what does it hold? And the future is 5 minutes from now. So even from a goal setting perspective is the rest of your day. So I think people, again, they will go to an all or nothing, a very black and white, magnify, project that way, and it has to be figured out that what's like my five-year plan or something like that. And people can explore that, but if that's overwhelming, then scale it back. What would you like to see for yourself tonight? What would you like your week to look like next month? And yes, times are changing, but you can have internal goals for yourself regardless of where the external world is at as well. The other thing I would comment around goal setting is the SMART goal model. So I use that often with clients as well. And for those that aren't familiar, it's used in many different platforms. But be specific. That's the S. Be measurable, attainable, realistic, relevant, and time bound. Right. So really looking at the features of all of those, those acronyms there of what that means. So really allowing yourself to, biggest thing, be specific. So sometimes people are like, I want to feel better. Well, what does that mean? I want to be healthier. Well, what does that mean? So be specific and start with one thing and I always say start small, like cut it in half. Whatever your goal is, cut it in half. And let's just go from there, right? But I think a big part of it, as you mentioned, that fear piece, yeah, when we look at fear, the acronym for that is false evidence appearing real. So a lot of the fear that we have isn't necessarily based in reality. Like there is legitimate fear and there is a role for fear that it helps us from a safety survival standpoint, but most of our fears they're not based in reality. So I often will ask people to review and reflect, where's my evidence to support this? So do I have any evidence to support this? If I feel that I do, okay, well, what's my safety plan behind it? So it's like even just, riding a bike and I'm learning. Well, I'm afraid I'm going to fall. Well, the evidence to support it is I might fall if I don't know how to ride a bike and I'm learning. So how can I safety plan around that? Make sure I have a helmet on and protective gear. Maybe I try riding a bike in a field where I can fall on grass rather than the pavement, right? Like different things like that, again, it's not that we take control of the situation, because control is often an illusion as well. But we can look at what's my responsibility on my side of the street. So I find too, with clients that are really getting into future-based thinking and a lot of that fear, is I will often ask is what is within your ability? Like, what are you responsible for? And at the end of the day, when we really look at it, there's very, 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 very small proportion of what we actually have control over. And it's within ourselves, right? We can't control people or places or things. So I'm, at the end of the day, only responsible for me. And I don't mean that in a dismissive tone, but really looking at where I'm investing my energy and my thoughts as well. All that what if thinking is all fear-based.
Right. Yeah. And I think we've been really really kind of stuck there for a while, or at least I have.
Yeah.
Been stuck there for quite a while. What if? What happens if? And yeah, it certainly doesn't serve me very well at all.
Yeah, and that what if thinking is people can be vulnerable then starting to do the research or Google. And I say that again with a smile on my face. And I remember when there was a discussion about, will school resume? Will it not? What's it going to look like? And, you know, there's all this chatter about it, and people are getting more and more anxious and worked up about it. And I intentionally had said, I have no control over it, if it happens or not. So I'm going to just wait and see. Like, you know, the schools had put out the scenario about they either go back, they don't go back, or there's like some modified going back, or whatever those three options were back in the summer. And people were trying to figure it all out. And I was saying there's nothing to figure out because we have no control over that. So I'm just going to wait and see, as opposed to plan for this, plan for that, plan for this. Again, there's an element of responsibility where we want to look at, do I have some childcare options and stuff like that? But at the end of the day, having everything figured out, we don't have, it doesn't really serve us because we can't predict the future. But there's so much fortune telling that goes on.
And do you think that sometimes, this is very general, but do you think that sometimes we use this what if and this kind of deep diving into the rabbit hole of to avoid our stuff?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think you've nailed it there, where all that what if thinking, that is analysis paralysis. So it's like you're on the hamster wheel and you're running, and it's very hard to get off of it. So when people are engaged in what if thinking, what I encourage in general is to always put out your thoughts, journal out your thoughts, get it out on paper. But then what you really want to do from a tool perspective is look at, how am I feeling? And that's that intuitive voice. Like, what are you actually feeling there? And if you're in that what if and a lot of that worry-based futurized thinking, the story writing, that just means that you're having fear. You're experiencing fear. You're scared. So you want to tap into that feeling and acknowledge it. Well, where in my body do I feel this? How is my experience with fear? Really explore that. It feels uncomfortable. That's why people don't like doing it. But that's how you release it and move through it. Then from there is going back and looking at your thinking and saying, okay, is this reality-based thinking? Like, is this rational? Or am I fortune telling? Do I have black and white thinking? Is it all, distorted in that way? And 9 times out of 10, people will look at their thinking and be like, yeah, I can see some distorted thought patterns in there. So from there, we start reframing. Oftentimes what people want to do is they just think positive, right? And they dismiss their feelings. But all that does is just push their feelings aside and it bubbles up. And that's where you can see maybe like a bit of a panic attack, or people are reactive in anger, or they might cry out of nowhere, or alternatively, they feel numb. So they're all dysfunctional emotional responses, but there's a buildup that happens. So it's so important to acknowledge those feelings underneath.
And so would that kind of be toxic positivity? Like, this is kind of a term I've been hearing about, a buzzword, this toxic positivity, being more harmful than actually feeling and processing.
Right. Exactly. It just, to me, it's like putting a Band-Aid over an infected wound. It's like, I don't see it, but I can certainly feel it, right? It's there. So I just, out of sight, out of mind. And it only works for so long. So that's where it hides it. And again, these things will bubble up and they'll show up. So there's another expression I'll use, is momentum from the past. And the past can be yesterday. So if we're not addressing things, and again, our feelings are going to show up in our current reality. And a basic example I can give you is like, if I'm, working, and I've got all these feelings I haven't connected to, I'm, maybe a little more irritable, and I'm driving home and I'm reactive in traffic, like I'm projecting all my stuff outwards. I've got this momentum that's happening and I'm not addressing the core issue. And sometimes people will say, you know, oh, I'll just exercise or, you know, run off that energy. Again, that's helpful for in the moment, but as a prolonged coping mechanism, we're not actually looking at how are you feeling. So, you know, I often will think of exercise in the respect of anger. Like I've got all this energy to burn. So, okay, fine, run it off or whatever that means, but you need to come back to the issue. How am I feeling here? So anger is often a clue. There's a lot more underneath the surface. So really addressing and acknowledging those feelings. When you do that, it takes away the power of it right away. So a simple acknowledgement will take away some of that power. And that's part of the process of actually releasing feelings. People will often look for relief, which is often that stuffing, and release is letting it out. So it's kind of the opposite. Release stuff, release out. And when we want to release out, you have to feel it and experience to move those feelings through your body and letting them go.
Which is uncomfortable and messy.
Right. And it's getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. So when I have clients in session and you know, they've been a stuffer and they start to become emotional, maybe they're crying. Yeah. I will often say to them, I'm so happy you're crying. Like I've got a smile on my face that you're crying. I'm just so thankful and grateful. And again, I feel privileged that they feel maybe uncomfortably comfortable with me to let that stuff out. That's the only way to heal, is to actually let that stuff out. Yeah.
And you mentioned journaling. Do you think everybody should journal?
It's a wonderful platform. Anybody can access it. There's some, you know, I do get a lot of hangups with journaling from people. They don't know how to journal, what's the right way, things like that. And there's a couple points I'll make to it. Is there is no right or wrong. You don't have to be grammatically correct. Write whatever you want. I often will always say, try and get to your feelings. So I will hand out feelings, feeling lists. I have feeling faces, things like that, just to get people to scan through, like, how am I actually feeling? And sometimes people will say, I don't like it because it doesn't make me feel good. And I'm like, well, it's working. It's bringing that stuff out. So again, you need to get to that place of acceptance or peace or comfort or whatever that is. You need to go through the discomfort first, right? So that's the healing process. So, you know, it's something that put some time limits on. You don't have to journal for 2 hours. Give yourself 15 minutes, you know, how am I feeling? If you find that your brain is very active and lots of stories, just get it out. It's the same as when you have a good vent to a friend and you're just like, "Wah," and you get all that stuff out. Journaling is the same kind of idea. Some people are afraid of people reading their journal. Well, rip it up if you want to after. Like, there's lots of different things that you can do for yourself in that, but it's just your own, you know, your own private platform to get whatever you want. You can swear in it. You can write bad words. It doesn't really matter. Just get that stuff out. It's like poison if you keep it all inside, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
How important is a physical practice, do you think, like exercise and movement, to creating change or helping work through your stuff? Like, I know you said we don't want to use it as a band-aid. You
Right.
still need to deal with it, but do you think it is important? I'm always interested on this.
Yeah, completely. In my practice, I'm a big advocate for holistic health. And what I mean when I say holistic health is I liken it to a chair with 4 legs. So you have your physical, biological leg, you have your psychological, emotional leg, you have a social leg, and a spiritual leg. So if you're missing care in one of those areas, think of it as your chair missing a leg. Like, your seat is going to be really wobbly, right? So your foundation that you're sitting upon is not stable. So when people will look at investing into their 4 legs of holistic health, it provides them with again, that anchored seat beneath. So for me, when I sit down in any chair, I often will give it a little shake, and I view that as almost like a spiritual message, okay, like what's missing for me? If my chair is wobbly, what's missing? If my chair is quite grounded, okay, great. What's working for me? So again, they're just little messages, is how I choose to view it. But from a physical health standpoint, it's essential. If you don't have gas in the tank, how are you expected to get anywhere? And when I look at physical health, I look at basic exercise. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to be in a gym or running a marathon or something like that. It could be going for a walk, 20 minutes, 3 times a week. Like, again, smart goal setting, be specific in that. So you want to look at what your current physical ability and functioning is at and work with yourself. I look at exercise, I look at food, water, and also sleep. Those are the kind of key elements that I'll look at and explore. And oftentimes I say start at, I don't want to say the basics. I don't mean that in a junior sense, but start there. Look at what are your sleep patterns? Are you getting adequate sleep? Are you actually eating, getting adequate nutrition and basic exercise? And, as you mentioned too, my kids, I have an 8 and a 3-year-old. So if my 3-year-old, even my 8-year-old for that matter, if she's hungry, if they haven't slept, they have no emotional coping mechanism. So us as adults, we're exactly the same. Our tantrums might look a little bit different, but we're exactly the same. Like we need to have sleep and, exercise and nutrients and that nourishment. We need those things in order to have function in other areas of our life.
I can definitely say that I'm serious. If I'm tired and hungry, it's like
Right.
a little more weepy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, that was very much like my jam. When I was tired, just the tears. Oh. So.
Which makes complete sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually really interested to hear your input or your thoughts on this. Lots of times when I'm working with clients in my space, and my space is private, so I'm typically working with people one-on-one or very small groups. So most of my people usually have a reason why they're coming to see me in a private space. And it's interesting when we're moving, that I find that the movement will actually move up or bring up emotions or bring them to the surface. And there will be a lot of like emotional response happening to movements. Do you know what are your thoughts on that?
I think sometimes even with movements in general, like you're allowing yourself to focus on something different. And in turn, if you're having a conversation, like I a lot of my clients too, they'll go for walks with support people, whoever that is in their social network. And that's where they get a lot of talking and a lot of releasing and emotional processing with their support system. And they like that in that aspect of walking. They're not necessarily looking right at each other, which takes away some of that pressure. They're active, they're doing something. So even when you think of an emotional release, you're physically releasing as well. So you've got kind of this flow through your body. And from a feeling standpoint, emotions are kind of stored in our body. Feelings are when we're consciously aware of them. So they're coming up and out. So I'd say that there's probably a connection there is what I would, as I think about it, that's what I would liken is happening. But that movement, I think, can help kind of stir the pot a little bit to get some of that stuff out. And with that, whether there's some guided questions or, again, just that safe environment really can allow stuff to bubble up.
Gotcha. Makes sense. I liked how you said feelings and emotions, like emotions get stored.
Yeah.
I like that. But that kind of leads me to, I had done some reading and it was a long time ago. So I don't even know if it was a reputable article, but they were talking about how walking or movement, specifically using both sides of the body, will help you process and help with decision making, which that kind of segued me into the ART.
Right. Yeah.
So ART, talk a little bit about it.
Sure. What drew me into, going through my training in that accelerated resolution therapy is the versatility and the applicability to so many different, issues, problems, roadblocks, etc. So it is an amazing tool that I have in my toolbox, is how I feel, and I've used it for so many different presenting concerns with clients. How ART works, art therapy, is it uses eye movements. So it's this back and forth eye movement. And what that does is it mimics REM sleep. And as the brain is engaged in that way, it will pull off your problem solving abilities and strengths that are naturally there. And what ART does is it looks at, it's almost like pulling the book off the library shelf, like you pull it off the bookshelf, and then it looks at the memory, and then it will reprocess how, like, it processes out all that negative image, sensation, emotion that's attached to it, and then it remaps how it's put back on the shelf. So the slogan in how this therapy is conducted, they say, you keep the knowledge, so you remember the facts, but you lose the pain. So all of that sensation that's attached in that negative way is no longer there. So you have the knowledge, but it's no longer it has that hold on you. And like I said, I've used this for many different, challenges that people have experienced, whether it's in the past or perceived challenges in the future. And the results are remarkable. It is based in science, like there's the efficacy behind it. It originated from the States. The lady that created this form of therapy. It's used a lot with war vets from a PTSD perspective. So it's pretty profound, and I love the imagery that is created. So as we go through eye movements, there are times where people are focusing specifically on a problem or whatever that is for them. And then there are times where they're focused solely on the sensations in body. And as those sensations in body are being focused on, my role is to help through the eye movements to help those feelings come up and out. And then we replace them. First, there's like a calm that's often experienced, and then there's a release. So it gets replaced in a more sort of positive, favorable way in the body. And then too, we can kind of remap and redesign how the memory is attached to it. So the imagery can get just like re-scripted in a way, in a more favorable way. So it's allowing you to process, and it is, I find it actually quite emotional watching people go through this, because as they're initially thinking about their problem, it brings up again anxiety, fear, sadness, hurt, whatever it is, and they've got their emotions. They might be crying, or you can see the anxiety coming from them. And then as they're remapping, you can see kind of a calm, and then some people they even smile or they start laughing as they're going through this, and it's pretty profound. The other thing with ART, what I really like, is that it's accelerated, meaning, the A for accelerated, meaning they're fast results. So I've had clients that will do a session on a particular issue, and then they feel that that's resolved and they'd like to use it for something else. So it's kind of like, the layers of an onion. You uncover stuff, and it's all memories that you're connected to or things that you're connected to. So it is different than EMDR. They both use eye movements, but they are different. And through that, eye movement, it does engage the brain to help from that problem solving ability. So it is pretty powerful, and I really enjoy it. Of course, with COVID, as far as the eye movements go, I can't be sitting close and use my hand. So the way ART works right now, it sounds really almost funny and ridiculous, is I have a pool noodle with a stick inside, and it's got a key card on the end, and it serves as the blank hand. So I'm waving my little pool noodle around, and people have a good laugh at that, and we quickly get into it, and they see, oh, okay, this is actually, it actually does really work. So it is pretty profound how it evolves.
That's awesome. I think that's really showing flexibility, right? Like we talked a little bit about the flexibility, being adaptable, like pool noodle.
Yeah.
still works.
Yeah, it works.
And I love that it's, I don't want to say like hacking because I'm into like biohacking. How can we make things faster? How can we make them better?
Right.
Not necessarily from an ease standpoint, but how can we create those changes, those lasting changes to
Right.
better ourselves, or feel better in order to make those changes we need. So I love that it's accelerated because who wants to sit in a chair for 10 years and not feel like they're creating change? I mean, obviously they will, but if people are experiencing those changes in like one session, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty neat because there's a distress scale that they'll rate their like level of intensity before, and then they re-rate it at the end of the session, and it always drops quite profoundly. And I find that people will be like, I feel better, but logically I shouldn't. So they're like in this debate on thinking versus feeling, and it's just allowing themselves to really trust how they're feeling, and that number will drop to zero even, right? So that is the norm, and the results in ART show that it is something that is long-standing. So the results will hold. And what I appreciate too from a trauma standpoint is that somebody does not have to share every like nitty-gritty detail out loud. They just need to visualize it and show their brain the problem, and from there the remapping occurs, and people can share what they want to. They don't have to. So that's what I really like about it. And as I mentioned, I use it as a complement to my practice because, as you said in my introduction, is I want to give people the tools to help them move along. I don't want people having to see me for 10 years and become dependent on that. I want to give them tools. I think if you want to see me for 10 years, great. Use that as a check-in point from a self-care standpoint, like you would the dentist, right? You go in for regular cleans. Check in for your mental health as well. You don't have to have a problem in order to come to therapy. So that's where I like long-term therapy in that regard, is use that as regular check-in points for yourself. But my goal as a psychologist is to give my clients those tools, but also to help them. And this is where ART is a real great tool to move through those roadblocks so that, again, move to the next layer of the onion, right? You're peeling the layers, and we can see and proceed the therapy from there. So it helps people move through those roadblocks and hangups a lot quicker.
Yeah, super helpful. And I can imagine life changing for so many people.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer, so I kind of just like to recap kind of three tools that we talked about in order to create shifts, or I guess calm out some of that noise, calm down some of the fear. So first, I think you mentioned boundaries.
Yes.
Setting boundaries. Journaling.
Yep.
Boundaries, journaling, and the one that really is sticking out to me is like being present in a moment. So not necessarily the what ifs. I mean, I'm sure I've forgotten. You're going to need to bring me back, but the what ifs are in the future. Like, what do we need right now?
Right. Yeah, and they all kind of parallel together. So, I guess the summary for those three principles is boundaries become clearer as you become clearer in the who am I question. So as you are more connected to yourself, your values, what gives you meaning, you can really start to look at the role of congruence. Do my insides match my outsides? I value, trust and honesty. So do I exhibit that, but also do the people I surround myself with exhibit that? If they don't, there's going to be, some stress and whatnot that's created from that. So you want to have clarity on the who am I question, which I will comment is not a question that you come to the answer and then you've arrived. Again, we're always evolving and growing, but it's just that idea of connecting to yourself and considering yourself in that. So boundaries, again, they're fluid. They're not forever. You don't have to have it all figured out. Try it out. People, if they respect your boundary, great. If they don't, I say great. It's just information. So boundaries aren't necessary in the sense that people need to respect them. Boundaries are for you to respect. So to give an example, I used to think like if I said to you, you can't yell at me, that was a boundary. I was being assertive. But that's actually a fallacy because I have no control over you and whether you're going to yell at me or anything like that. But I have control over myself. So I can say from a boundary perspective, I'm not comfortable with you yelling at me. If it continues, I'm going to leave. So I'm fully prepared to follow through and kind of protect myself and what my needs are, regardless of what you do. So if you calm it down, great, then we can talk. If you keep yelling at me, again, great. I just know I'm going to remove myself. So that's where you really want to look at for your boundaries. They are for you. And again, not being attached to an outcome that people are going to respect them. It's all information gathering. From a journaling perspective, feelings. I always encourage you get to the bottom, look at how you're feeling. So I mentioned that idea of journaling your thoughts, but then looking at how are you feeling, what's coming up underneath that, and then going back to reframing your thinking. Fear is often future based. It's all that what if and worry based thinking. So the antidote to fear is faith. So looking at your spiritual practice, trusting in the process. And that goes back into what I talked about from holistic health lens. So your physical health, your psychological, emotional, your social, and your spiritual health. So there's all different elements. And if anybody who's listening has questions, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to answer them and share more about those things. And that idea of being present in the here and now, a great tool for that is gratitude journaling. So what are 3 things I'm thankful for today? And that can help you stay connected in your present moment. And gratitude journaling is one of the most effective ways to help change people's thinking and efficient ways. So when we look at gratitude, it helps us stay in the moment and recognize things that are happening to us for us, but also gratitude for ourselves. So practice internal gratitude. I'm thankful I had a boundary today and I didn't watch the news or those types of things. So really embracing yourself in that process. And you can always practice mindfulness and meditation. They're 2 different things, but mindfulness and meditation are always helpful as well to look at grounding techniques. Grounding techniques are just in the here and now. And for anybody who's feeling really anxious or getting caught up in all that futuristic thinking, a great grounding technique, it's called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you literally go through your senses. So 5 things that I can see, describe them. So I don't want to just say, oh, I see my coffee cup. I see my coffee cup. It's white. It has blue letters on it. Like you want to describe these things. 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can hear, 1 thing you can taste. It doesn't matter what, senses the order you go through, but it's just a way of getting you out of here and into your body. Ground yourself in the moment. So that would be a little bit of a summary from all of those different elements. But if anybody has questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask. My Instagram handles at YYC Psychology for anybody who's listening as well.
Awesome. I'll definitely be putting all of your info in the show notes when it's posted so people can get a hold of you. And thank you so much for hopping on and giving us your insight and those tools that we can all use to just breathe a little bit easier through this time.
Slow down. Yeah, no, thank you. And I really appreciate the time and being able to share a little bit, as obviously this is my passion. So I'm really grateful that you're providing a platform for people to learn. So thanks.
Thank you.